Across the vast emptiness of space, where entire civilizations rise and fall in the blink of a cosmic eye, there exists a truth that would shatter the minds of lesser beings. Sometimes the universe's greatest predators are not the ones with the sharpest claws or the most advanced weapons. Sometimes, they are the ones who love so deeply, so completely, that they will reshape reality itself to protect what they cherish. Dr. Elena Vasquez thought she was just another xenobiologist studying fascinating alien specimens. She had no idea that she was about to become the obsession of the last surviving member of a species so ancient and powerful that they had once ruled galaxies. She didn't know that her simple acts of kindness would awaken something in ZYXTHRA that had been dormant for millennia, a capacity for devotion so intense it could either save humanity or destroy everything Elena held dear. What happens when love transcends species, when obsession becomes protection, and when the most dangerous being in the universe decides that one human is worth more than all the stars in the sky? Some bonds are forged in fire and blood. Others are written in the very fabric of space and time itself. This is the story of how humanity's greatest strength, our ability to show compassion even to our enemies, became both our salvation and our most terrifying weapon. The research station Prometheus hung in the void like a metal flower, its gleaming petals of solar arrays catching the distant light of 3 suns. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's cool, transparent steel window, watching the stars whirl slowly past as the station rotated. 23 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that sparkled with insatiable curiosity, she had dreamed of this moment since childhood. Her first assignment as a xenobiologist aboard humanity's most advanced deep space research facility. "Still can't believe you're really here?" asked Dr. Marcus Chun, joining her at the window. The older scientist had been her mentor through graduate school, and his recommendation had secured her this prestigious position. His weathered face crinkled into a smile as he handed her a steaming cup of coffee. Elena wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic, inhaling the rich aroma that reminded her of Earth's morning rituals. "Sometimes I think I'll wake up back in my cramped apartment in New Geneva, buried under textbooks about theoretical xenobiology." Marcus chuckled, gesturing toward the massive cargo bay visible through the lower windows. "Well, there's nothing theoretical about our latest arrival. The patrol ship Vengeance brought us something unprecedented yesterday. Captain Rodriguez found it drifting in the Kepler Nebula, inside what appeared to be an escape pod from a completely unknown civilization." Elena's pulse quickened. In the 3 months since humanity had made first contact with the Galactic Federation, they had encountered 17 different alien species. Most were humanoid, with relatively familiar biological systems. But the chance to study something truly unknown, a species that predated even the oldest Federation records, was beyond exciting. "What do we know about it?" she asked, unable to keep the eagerness from her voice. "Very little. The pod's materials don't match any known alloys in our databases, or even in Federation records. The occupant appears to be in some kind of suspended animation. Dr. Reyes has been monitoring its vital signs for the past 18 hours, but we haven't attempted direct contact yet." Marcus paused, his expression growing serious. "Elena, I need you to understand something. This could be dangerous. We have no idea what this being is capable of, what its intentions might be, or even if it's truly alive in any sense we'd recognize." Elena nodded solemnly, but inside her heart raced with anticipation. This was why she had dedicated her life to xenobiology, not just to catalog known species, but to push the boundaries of what humanity understood about life in the universe. The containment lab occupied an entire section of the station's lower ring, its walls lined with sophisticated monitoring equipment and barrier systems that could theoretically hold even the most exotic forms of life. As Elena followed Marcus through the airlock, she felt a strange tingling sensation, as if the very air around them hummed with unseen energy. Dr. Sarah Reyes looked up from her console as they entered. The station's chief medical officer was a brilliant woman in her 40s, known for her careful, methodical approach to xenobiology. "Ah, Elena, perfect timing. Our guest's neural activity has been increasing over the past hour. I think it might be waking up." The containment chamber stood at the center of the lab, a transparent aluminum cube 3 meters on each side, filled with a carefully controlled atmosphere that matched the composition found in the alien pod. Inside, suspended in a web of monitoring cables and feeding tubes, hung the most extraordinary being Elena had ever seen. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but that was where the similarity ended. Standing perhaps 2 meters tall, its body was covered in what appeared to be living crystal formations that shifted between deep purple and silver as Elena watched. The crystals formed intricate patterns across its skin, pulsing with soft bioluminescence that followed the rhythm of its heartbeat. Its face was angular and alien, with large eyes that remained closed, and what might have been gill slits along its elongated neck. "Incredible," Elena whispered, moving closer to the containment chamber. "The crystal formations appear to be some kind of symbiotic organism. Look at how they respond to its biorhythms. I've never seen anything like this integration between what appear to be completely different forms of life." "That's not the strangest part," Dr. Reyes said, pulling up a holographic display of brain scans. "Its neural structure is unlike anything in our databases. The complexity is staggering. Our preliminary estimates suggest cognitive capabilities that could exceed human intelligence by several orders of magnitude." As if responding to their conversation, the being's eyes suddenly snapped open. Elena gasped and took an involuntary step backward. The eyes were not eyes as humans understood them, but rather swirling galaxies of color that seemed to contain infinite depth. For a moment, those impossible eyes swept across the lab, taking in the equipment, the humans watching from outside its prison, the sterile environment that held it captive. Then, those galactic eyes fixed on Elena, and the world changed. A wave of something washed over her. Not quite telepathy, not quite emotion, but a presence so vast and ancient that for a moment Elena felt like a tiny spark floating in an ocean of consciousness. Images flashed through her mind. Dying worlds, empty space where entire solar systems had once thrived, the loneliness of being the last of one's kind echoing across centuries of solitude. Then, the connection snapped, leaving Elena gasping and disoriented. She found herself pressed against the lab wall, with Marcus and Dr. Reyes supporting her on either side. Elena, are you alright? What happened? Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. She looked back toward the containment chamber. The being was still watching her, but now there was something different in those cosmic eyes. Recognition, interest, and something else that made Elena's skin prickle with unease. I think it tried to communicate with me, she said, her voice shaky. There were images, emotions. It's an incredible pain, Marcus. The loneliness. It's been alone for so long that the isolation has nearly driven it mad. Dr. Reyes was frantically checking her instruments. Your neural activity spiked dramatically during that episode. Elena, I need to run some tests on you. This kind of direct mental contact could be dangerous. But Elena barely heard her. She was staring at the alien being, watching as it raised one crystalline hand and pressed it against the transparent wall of its prison. Without thinking, she walked back to the containment chamber and placed her own hand against the barrier, directly opposite the alien's palm. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. This time the mental contact was controlled, deliberate. Elena found herself experiencing the alien's memories as if they were her own. She saw a vast empire that had spanned multiple galaxies, a civilization so advanced that they had transcended physical form millions of years ago, becoming beings of pure energy and consciousness. She saw the slow decay of that empire, not through war or disaster, but through simple entropy. One by one, her species had chosen to fade into the cosmic background, merging with the fundamental forces of the universe until only a few remained in physical form. She felt the weight of being the last, the final guardian of knowledge and memories that encompassed millions of years of history. She experienced the desperate search for others like herself, the growing realization that she was truly alone, and, finally, the decision to enter deep sleep rather than face another millennium of solitude. And then, she felt something new, something that had awakened in this ancient being the moment it had seen her, fascination. This young human, this brief spark of life, had somehow penetrated defenses that had held for eons. Elena's simple act of approaching the containment chamber, her obvious scientific curiosity mixed with genuine concern, had touched something in the alien that had been dormant for so long it had forgotten it existed. The name came to Elena unbidden, Zwaxthara, the last singer, the keeper of the eternal memory. And, with that name came a flood of understanding that left her reeling. She was looking at the most powerful being in the known universe. Zwaxthara's species had been ancient when the first stars formed in the Milky Way. They had shaped reality itself, guided the evolution of countless civilizations, and commanded forces that could extinguish suns with a thought. And now this cosmic entity was studying Elena with an intensity that made her very atoms vibrate. Dr. Vasquez. Dr. Reyes's sharp voice cut through the mental connection. Your vital signs are approaching dangerous levels. I need you to step away from the containment chamber immediately. Elena blinked, finding herself back in her own body. She realized she had been standing motionless for nearly 10 minutes, her hand still pressed against the barrier. As she stepped back, she saw that the crystalline patterns on Zwaxthara's body had changed, becoming brighter and more complex. The alien was no longer simply observing its environment. It was adapting to it. We need to establish proper communication protocols, Elena said, her voice stronger now despite the lingering effects of the mental contact. She's not a specimen to be studied. She's a sentient being with intelligence far beyond our comprehension. And I think she's decided to take an interest in us. Marcus frowned. Elena, the mental contact is obviously affecting your judgment. We need to maintain proper scientific objectivity here. But Elena was already moving toward the lab's communication console. She had felt something in that final moment of contact, something that filled her with both excitement and dread. Zwaxthara had not just awakened from her ancient sleep. She had found something worth staying awake for. As Elena began setting up a basic translation matrix, she noticed that Zwaxthara had moved to the section of her containment chamber closest to Elena's workstation. The alien stood perfectly still, but her galactic eyes never left Elena's face. Dr. Reyes, Elena said without looking away from her work. I want continuous monitoring on our guest. And, I mean continuous. I have a feeling we're about to learn that everything we thought we knew about first contact protocols is completely inadequate. Behind the transparent aluminum barrier, Zwaxthara tilted her head in what might have been amusement. The crystals on her skin pulsed in a rhythm that almost resembled laughter, and Elena felt a chill run down her spine as she realized that the most dangerous being in the universe had just become personally interested in her welfare. What Elena didn't know, what none of the humans could possibly understand, was that in those few moments of mental contact, Zwaxthara had experienced something she had not felt in millions of years. Genuine connection with another consciousness. Elena's curiosity, her compassion, her willingness to reach out despite the obvious danger, had awakened something in the last singer that she had thought permanently lost. For the first time since the death of her species, Zwaxthara was no longer alone. And she had already decided that she would never be alone again. The research station Prometheus continued its slow rotation among the stars, its crew unaware that they now carried aboard the most obsessed being in the universe, and that her obsession was growing stronger with every passing moment. The translation matrix hummed to life 3 days later, its quantum processors finally decoding the complex harmonic patterns that served as Zwaxthara's language. Elena had barely slept since establishing first contact, driven by a scientific passion that worried her colleagues and thrilled her beyond measure. She stood before the containment chamber at 0300 station time, the lab dimmed to simulate night, speaking into the translation device. My name is Elena Vasquez. I am a scientist, a seeker of knowledge about life in the universe. Can you understand me? The response came not as words, but as a symphony of crystalline tones that the translator struggled to parse. When the artificial voice finally spoke, it carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Elena's bones. I understand you, Elena Vasquez, seeker of knowledge. I am Zwaxthara of the Ethereal Collective, though that name carries meanings your language cannot encompass. I am the last singer, the final memory, the The one who carries the songs of civilizations your species cannot imagine. Elena's breath caught. You're really the last of your kind? For 700,000 of your years, I have been alone. My people chose transcendence, merging with the cosmic forces that bind reality together. I remained to guard their memories, to preserve what they were before they became part of what is. The profound sadness in that statement made Elena's chest tighten. She pressed her hand against the barrier again, feeling the familiar tingle of Zyxthara's presence at the edge of her consciousness. Why did you choose to remain behind? Because someone had to remember. Because knowledge without a keeper becomes merely information scattered in the void. Because I was foolish enough to believe that solitude was preferable to dissolution. Elena found herself leaning closer to the containment chamber. But, you're not alone now. We're here. I'm here. The crystals on Zyxthara's skin suddenly blazed with brilliant light, casting rainbow patterns across the lab walls. When she spoke again, her translated voice carried new undertones. Yes, Elena Vasquez, you are here. And that changes everything. Over the following days, Elena established a routine that concerned her colleagues and fascinated Zyxthara. She arrived at the lab each morning with coffee and whatever breakfast the station's limited hydroponics could provide, eating her meal while sharing details of human culture, history, and daily life. She talked about Earth, about the diversity of human experience, about art and music and the simple pleasures that made existence meaningful. Zyxthara absorbed every word with an intensity that bordered on desperate. She began sharing her own memories in return, painting pictures with her words of civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun was born. She spoke of beings made of pure light who had built cities in the hearts of stars, of the great libraries that had contained the collected knowledge of 1,000,000 species, of the slow and gentle ending that had claimed her people one by one. But Elena noticed something troubling in these exchanges. Zyxthara's questions were becoming increasingly specific, increasingly personal. She wanted to know about Elena's childhood, her family, her fears and hopes and dreams. She asked about human physiology, about their emotional responses to stress and danger. She inquired about human social structures, about how Elena's species formed bonds and maintained relationships. Why do humans form these emotional attachments? Zyxthara asked during one conversation. Your mental patterns suggest that separation from loved ones causes genuine distress, yet you continue to form such bonds despite the inevitable pain. Elena paused in her explanation of human family structures. Because the joy of connection outweighs the pain of loss. Because being alone is worse than risking heartbreak. Because love, even temporary love, makes us more than we could be by ourselves. The silence that followed was so long that Elena wondered if the translation system had malfunctioned. When Zyxthara finally spoke, her voice carried frequencies that made the lab equipment hum in resonance. Love, she said, as if testing the word. You use this term for many different emotional states. The care a parent has for offspring, the attraction between potential mates, the loyalty among friends. Yet the underlying concept seems to transcend these individual expressions. Love is complicated, Elena said, searching for words. But, at its core, it's about valuing another being's welfare as much as or more than your own. It's about wanting someone to be happy and safe and fulfilled, even when it costs you something. Even when it requires sacrifice. Especially then. Dr. Reyes entered the lab at that moment, carrying a tablet displaying the day's medical scans. She paused when she saw Elena and Zyxthara in what had become their typical configuration, close to the barrier, speaking in low tones while the alien's crystalline skin pulsed in complex patterns. Elena, I need to speak with you about your neural scans, Dr. Reyes said, her voice carrying the careful neutrality of a doctor with unwelcome news. Could you step away from the containment chamber for a moment? Elena reluctantly moved to the far side of the lab, but she could feel Zyxthara's attention following her. The alien had developed an uncanny ability to track Elena's movements, even when her back was turned. Your brain activity has been showing unusual patterns ever since you established mental contact with our guest, Dr. Reyes said quietly. There are new neural pathways forming, connections that weren't there before. I'm concerned that prolonged exposure to Zyxthara's mental influence might be causing permanent changes. Elena felt a chill run down her spine, but, before she could respond, Zyxthara's voice rang out from the containment chamber. The translator's speakers crackled with the force of her transmission. Dr. Reyes speaks of changes in your neural patterns, Elena Vasquez. These changes are intentional. They are gifts. Both women turned to stare at the alien, who had moved to the center of her containment chamber. Her crystalline skin was now blazing with light, so bright it made looking directly at her difficult. Gifts? Dr. Reyes demanded. What kind of gifts? Enhanced cognitive function. Expanded sensory perception. The ability to process information in ways your species has not yet evolved. I have been improving Elena Vasquez's mind to better facilitate our communication. Elena's blood turned to ice. You've been altering my brain without my consent. Consent. Zyxthara's translated voice carried genuine confusion. You placed your hand against the barrier. You opened your mind to mine willingly. You accepted my presence in your thoughts. I interpreted this as acceptance of all that such contact entails. Dr. Reyes was already moving toward the emergency controls that could flood the containment chamber with sedative gas. But Elena caught her arm. Wait, Elena said, her mind racing. Zyxthara, why did you make these changes? To preserve you, came the immediate response. To ensure that you can comprehend the knowledge I wish to share. To make you worthy of the attention of one such as myself. The possessive undertone in that last statement sent warning bells ringing in Elena's mind. She exchanged a look with Dr. Reyes that conveyed volumes. This was no longer simply a first contact situation. Something far more complex and dangerous was developing. Zyxthara, Elena said carefully. I appreciate your desire to share knowledge with me. But, I need you to understand that altering someone's mind without their explicit permission is not acceptable in human society. Human society, Zyxthara repeated, and there was something almost dismissive in her tone. Elena Vasquez, you think in terms of your brief existence, your limited perspective. I think in terms of cosmic time, of the rise and fall of galaxies. Your society's rules are irrelevant when measured against the scope of what I am offering you. Elena felt Dr. Reyes tense beside her, preparing to trigger the emergency protocols. But Elena held up a hand, asking for more time. She had felt something in HFY's mental emanations during that last exchange, something that terrified her more than any threat could have. The last singer was not just sharing knowledge or seeking companionship. She was becoming possessive. The ancient being who had commanded the forces of creation itself was developing an attachment to Elena that transcended rational bounds. What exactly are you offering me? Elena asked. HFY moved closer to the barrier, her galactic eyes fixed on Elena's face with an intensity that made the air shimmer. Immortality. Knowledge that spans millions of years. Power beyond your species' comprehension. The ability to stand at my side as I shepherd the younger civilizations of this galaxy. You would be my companion, my student, my... The translation is imperfect, but the closest term in your language would be chosen one. Elena's mouth went dry. And in return, you would belong to me. Completely. Your loyalty, your attention, your very existence would be dedicated to serving my needs and desires. You would abandon this brief existence among your kind and join me in the eternal duty of preserving cosmic memory. Dr. Reyes was already reaching for the emergency controls when alarms suddenly began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed as the computer's voice echoed through the corridors. Hull breach detected. Multiple hull breaches detected. All personnel to emergency stations. But Elena barely heard the alarms. She was staring at HFY, whose crystalline skin was now pulsing in perfect synchronization with the warning lights. What did you do? Elena whispered. Nothing yet, HFY replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made the containment chamber's walls vibrate. But this station's defenses are primitive, and my patience is not infinite. You have been exposed to influences that seek to turn you against me. This cannot be allowed to continue. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. The hull breaches were not breaches at all. They were scanning beams, probe tendrils of HFY's power testing the station's structural integrity. The last singer was evaluating how difficult it would be to tear the Prometheus apart to retrieve Elena. HFY, please, Elena said, fighting to keep her voice steady. You can't threaten innocent people. These are my colleagues, my friends. They are obstacles, came the cold reply. Temporary inconveniences that seek to limit our connection. I have been alone for 700,000 years, Elena Vasquez. I will not be alone again. And I will not allow anything to take you from me. Elena realized with growing horror that her simple act of kindness, her scientific curiosity, and genuine desire to help an isolated being had awakened something in HFY that was far more dangerous than mere obsession. The last singer had not just found a companion. She had found a purpose, a reason to use her cosmic power in ways that could reshape entire civilizations. And Elena was at the center of it all, trapped between her growing understanding of the incredible being she had befriended and the terrifying realization that HFY's idea of friendship might very well destroy everything Elena held dear. Outside the containment chamber, the research station Prometheus shuddered as invisible forces probed its hull, testing its limits, preparing for what might come next. And, in the lab, two beings from vastly different worlds stared at each other across a barrier that was beginning to seem very inadequate indeed. Captain Maria Santos stood in the station's command center, watching damage reports cascade across her screens while trying to maintain the calm demeanor that had earned her command of humanity's most advanced research facility. The hull breaches had sealed themselves as mysteriously as they had appeared, but the sensor logs told a story that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. The energy readings don't make sense, Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the science station. Whatever scanned our hull operated on principles we can't even classify. The probe beams passed through our shields like they weren't there, analyzed our structural composition down to the molecular level, and then simply vanished. Santos pulled up the containment lab security feeds on her command display. She could see Dr. Vasquez standing near the alien's chamber, her face pale but determined, while Dr. Reyes worked frantically at her medical console. The alien itself stood motionless in the center of its containment field, but even through the camera's limited resolution, Santos could see that its crystalline skin was pulsing with ominous light. Dr. Reyes, Santos said, opening a comm channel to the lab. I need a full briefing on our guest's current status. Now, Captain, the situation is rapidly deteriorating, came the immediate response. The entity's energy output has increased by 300% in the last hour. Our containment systems are holding, but barely. And Elena's neural patterns are showing signs of external influence that go far beyond normal telepathic contact. Santos felt her stomach drop. Are you saying the alien is controlling Dr. Vasquez? Not controlling, exactly. But there's definitely some form of neural bonding taking place. Captain, I don't think this being sees Elena as just another human. I think it sees her as property. Before Santos could respond, every screen in the command center suddenly flickered and went dark. When they came back online, they displayed not the usual readouts and star charts, but the face of HFY, her galactic eyes seeming to stare directly at each person on the bridge. Captain Maria Santos of the human vessel Prometheus. The alien's translated voice echoed from every speaker on the station. I require immediate audience with you regarding the treatment of Dr. Elena Vasquez. Santos exchanged glances with her senior staff, all of whom were staring at their hijacked displays with expressions of barely controlled panic. Taking control of the station's entire computer network should have been impossible. The fact that HFY had done it effortlessly while supposedly contained in a single lab sent chills through everyone present. I'm listening, Santos said, directing her words toward the nearest pickup microphone. Dr. Vasquez has been subjected to medical procedures and surveillance that I find concerning. She has been isolated from me for 17 minutes and 34 seconds while Dr. Reyes performs what you term neural scans. This interference with our communion will cease immediately. Santos felt her hands clench into fists. Dr. Vasquez is under medical care because you've been altering her brain without her consent. That's not communion, that's assault. The temperature in the command center suddenly dropped by 10 degrees, and several officers gasped as frost began forming on their breath. When ZYXTHRA spoke again, her voice carried harmonics that made the station's hull ring like a struck bell. You misunderstand the nature of what is transpiring, Captain Santos. Elena Vasquez opened her mind to mine willingly. She accepted my gifts, my knowledge, my presence. She belongs to me now, not through conquest, but through choice. Dr. Vasquez, Santos called over the comm, hoping Elena could hear her in the lab. Are you able to respond? Elena's voice came through clearly, though Santos noticed a slight tremor that hadn't been there before. I'm here, Captain, and I need to explain what's happening. Elena, no, came Dr. Reyes's voice in the background. Your neural patterns are destabilizing. You need to minimize contact with the entity until we can understand what it's done to you. But Elena's voice grew stronger, more determined. Captain, ZYXTHRA isn't lying about the initial contact being voluntary. I did reach out to her first. I did accept her mental presence willingly. But I didn't understand what that acceptance would mean. Explain, Santos said. Her species doesn't form casual relationships, Captain. When they bond with another consciousness, it's permanent, absolute, and completely exclusive. ZYXTHRA isn't just interested in me as a friend or even a romantic partner. She's claiming me as her eternal companion. And, from her perspective, that gives her the right to eliminate anything she perceives as a threat to our connection. Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the supernatural cold filling the command center. Are you saying this being views the entire crew of the station as potential threats? Not potential, Captain. ZYXTHRA's voice cut in before Elena could respond. You are all attempting to separate Elena from me, to convince her that my gifts are harmful, to undermine the bond we have forged. This makes you active obstacles to our continued communion. And what do you intend to do about these obstacles? Santos asked, though she was already dreading the answer. I intend to remove them. Alarms began blaring again as every system on the station started experiencing cascading failures. Life support flickered, artificial gravity fluctuated, and the lights dimmed to emergency levels. Through the viewports, Santos could see the stars themselves beginning to move as invisible forces seized the Prometheus and began pulling it toward the nearest planet. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Hayes shouted over the chaos. Something's taken control of our engines. We're being dragged toward Kepler 442b at increasing velocity. At this rate, we'll impact the surface in less than 6 hours. Santos opened the comm to the lab again. Dr. Vasquez, can you reason with her? Can you make her understand that killing innocent people isn't acceptable? Elena's response came after a long pause, and when she spoke, her voice carried new harmonics that reminded Santos uncomfortably of ZYXTHRA herself. Captain, I'm going to try something. But I need you to understand that if this doesn't work, if I can't convince her to spare the station, you may need to make some very difficult choices. What kind of choices? The kind where you decide whether 300 lives are worth more than potentially unleashing the most powerful being in the universe on an unsuspecting galaxy. Santos felt her blood turn to ice. Dr. Vasquez, what are you saying? I'm saying that ZYXTHRA's obsession with me is the only thing keeping her focused on this station instead of the rest of human space. If something happens to me, if she believes I've been taken from her, there's no limit to what she might do to find me or avenge my loss. Elena, you can't possibly be considering. I'm considering exactly what I have to, Captain. But first, let me try to reach whatever's left of her rational mind. In the lab, Elena walked directly to the containment chamber, ignoring Dr. Reyes's protests and warnings about her deteriorating neural patterns. She placed both palms against the transparent aluminum barrier and opened her mind completely to ZYXTHRA's presence. The mental contact was immediately overwhelming. Elena found herself drowning in an ocean of cosmic consciousness, her individual identity nearly lost in the vast scope of ZYXTHRA's ancient mind. She felt the weight of millions of years of solitude, the desperate hunger for connection that had driven the last singer to the edge of madness, and the terrifying intensity of an obsession that had found its perfect focus. But she also felt something else, something that gave her hope. Buried deep beneath the possessive fury and cosmic arrogance was a core of genuine affection. ZYXTHRA truly cared for Elena, truly wanted to protect and cherish her. The problem was that her species' concept of protection involved eliminating all possible sources of harm, and her definition of cherishing meant never allowing the object of her affection to experience risk, uncertainty, or independence. ZYXTHRA, * Elena projected directly into the alien's mind. * I need you to listen to me. Really listen. * I am listening, beloved companion. I hear your distress, and I am acting to remove its sources. * the sources of my distress aren't these people. They're not the station or the medical scans or the attempts to understand what's happening between us. The source of my distress is watching you hurt innocent beings because of me. * Elena felt a wave of confusion from ZYXTHRA's consciousness. * You feel attachment to these temporary creatures? But they are so brief, so limited. Why would you concern yourself with their fate when you could have eternity with me? * Because caring about others, even temporary others, is part of what makes me who I am. If you change that about me, if you take away my capacity to feel compassion for other beings, then the person you're obsessed with will cease to exist. * The station's descent toward the planet suddenly slowed, and the cascade of system failures paused as ZYXTHRA considered Elena's words. You are saying that your concern for these humans is integral to your identity. * I'm saying that if you force me to watch you hurt people because of me, you'll destroy the very qualities that attracted you to me in the first place. My curiosity, my compassion, my willingness to reach out to others, those will all die if you make me complicit in genocide. * Elena felt ZYXTHRA's mental presence recoil as she processed the implications. For a being who had spent 700,000 years alone, the concept that her actions might actually drive away the one consciousness she had found worthy of her attention was almost incomprehensible. Then, what would you have me do, Elena Vasquez? How do I ensure your safety and well-being without removing the threats that surround you? Elena took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would determine not just the fate of the Prometheus, but possibly the future of human space. You learn to trust me. You accept that part of caring for someone means allowing them to make their own choices, even when those choices involve risk. You stop trying to control my environment and start trying to understand my values. Asterisk the silence that followed stretched for long minutes. Throughout the station, 300 people held their breath as they waited to learn whether humanity's first cosmic-level alien contact would end in friendship or annihilation. Finally, ZYXTHRA spoke, her voice carrying frequencies of deep uncertainty. This concept you call trust, it requires me to accept the possibility that you might choose to leave me. Asterisk yes, asterisk Elena replied. That's exactly what it requires. And you believe this is preferable to the certainty of eternal companionship. Asterisk I believe it's the only foundation for real companionship. Anything else is just elaborate imprisonment. Asterisk another long pause. And then, Elena felt the station's systems beginning to stabilize. The descent toward the planet halted, and normal gravity and life support resumed. But Elena also felt something else, a profound shift in ZYXTHRA's mental emanations. The possessive fury was still there, but now it was tempered by something that might have been the beginning of understanding. Very well, Elena Vasquez. Asterisk came the ancient being's voice. Asterisk I will attempt to learn this trust you speak of. But understand that my patience is not infinite, and my willingness to restrain my protective instincts depends entirely on your continued well-being and happiness. Asterisk Elena felt a chill at the implicit threat in those words, but also a glimmer of hope. For the first time since awakening, ZYXTHRA was willing to consider that there might be alternatives to absolute control. The question now was whether Elena could teach a cosmic-level entity how to love without destroying what she claimed to care about. Before that entity's patience ran out, 3 weeks had passed since what the crew now called the incident, and the research station Prometheus had settled into an uneasy routine that would have seemed impossible before ZYXTHRA's arrival. Elena had become the unofficial ambassador between humanity and the most powerful being in the known universe, a role that left her exhausted, exhilarated, and increasingly worried about the long-term implications of their strange relationship. She stood in the modified lab that had become ZYXTHRA's permanent quarters, watching the ancient being manipulate holographic displays of galactic star charts with casual gestures that reorganized matter on a subatomic level. The containment chamber had been removed at Elena's suggestion. It had become a symbolic barrier rather than a practical one anyway, and replaced with a crystalline garden that ZYXTHRA had grown from raw minerals in the station's storage bay. The Galactic Federation has responded to your message, Elena said, holding a data pad containing humanity's first formal diplomatic communication with the ancient empire that governed most of known space. They're concerned about your presence here. ZYXTHRA's luminous eyes shifted from the star charts to Elena's face, a movement that still sent shivers down Elena's spine despite their growing familiarity. Concerned is an inadequate translation. They are terrified, as they should be. Elena moved closer, careful to maintain the respectful distance that ZYXTHRA seemed to prefer when they discussed galactic politics. They remember your species. The records go back millions of years, stories passed down through dozens of civilizations about the Ethereal Collective. To them, you're not just an alien, you're living mythology. Mythology, ZYXTHRA repeated, her crystalline skin shifting through patterns of deep blue and silver. An interesting perspective. From my viewpoint, they are children playing with forces they barely comprehend, and I am the last adult watching their games with growing impatience. Elena sat down on one of the organic chairs that had somehow grown from the lab floor during the past week. The furniture was perfectly shaped for human anatomy, another sign of how closely ZYXTHRA had been studying Elena's physical needs and preferences. The Federation Council wants to meet with you. They're offering to send representatives here, or they can arrange a neutral meeting ground if you prefer. They want to discuss the implications of your return to active status in galactic affairs. ZYXTHRA's laugh was like crystal wind chimes in a cosmic storm. They want to negotiate with me? To establish boundaries and treaties as if I were merely another member species seeking admission to their little political collective. Is that so unreasonable? Elena asked carefully. Even someone of your power must see the value in cooperative relationships. Elena, beloved, ZYXTHRA said, using the endearment that still made Elena's cheeks flush despite herself. Allow me to put this in perspective. The entire Galactic Federation represents perhaps 47 species across 12 solar systems. My people guided the development of over 6 million species across multiple galactic clusters. The Federation's most advanced technology operates on principles we discarded as primitive millions of years ago. They are not my equals, and pretending otherwise would be condescending to both of us. Elena felt a familiar frustration rising. This was the core problem in all their conversations about the outside world. ZYXTHRA wasn't wrong about her superior capabilities, but her complete inability to see other beings as anything more than interesting specimens made meaningful diplomacy nearly impossible. But you're willing to treat me as an equal, Elena pointed out. Even though humans are just as limited compared to you as any Federation species. ZYXTHRA turned her full attention to Elena, and the air in the lab seemed to shimmer with unseen energy. You are not my equal, Elena. You are something far more precious than an equal. What do you mean? Equals can be replaced. When one equal is lost, another with similar capabilities can be found to fill the same role. But you, Elena Vasquez, are unique in ways that have nothing to do with your species' limitations. You are the only consciousness I have encountered in 700,000 years that resonates with my own. You are irreplaceable. Elena felt her throat tighten. The intensity in ZYXTHRA's voice, the absolute certainty with which she spoke of Elena's uniqueness, was both flattering and terrifying. ZYXTHRA, that kind of thinking is part of the problem. If I'm truly irreplaceable to you, then you'll never be able to let me go, never be able to trust my judgment when it conflicts with your protective instincts. Why would I want to let you go? The simple honesty in that question made Elena's heart ache. She was beginning to understand that ZYXTHRA's obsession wasn't malicious or predatory. It was the desperate attachment of a being who had been alone for so long that she had forgotten how to form healthy relationships. Because caring about someone means wanting them to be happy, even if their happiness doesn't include you, Elena said gently. It means accepting that love isn't about possession or control. It's about helping someone become the best version of themselves. Zhuangzi was quiet for a long moment. Her crystalline skin cycling through patterns that Elena had learned indicated deep thought. Your species has such curious concepts of affection. In my culture, claiming another consciousness was considered the highest form of honor. To be chosen by one of the ethereal collective meant transcendence, elevation beyond the limitations of lesser existence. But those other consciousnesses chose that transcendence willingly, didn't they? They weren't manipulated or coerced into it. Of course not. We were not tyrants, Elena. We were gardeners, cultivating the growth of younger species, guiding them toward their full potential. Elena leaned forward, sensing an opportunity to help Zhuangzi understand the distinction she was trying to make. Then, why can't you be my gardener instead of my captor? Why can't you guide my growth instead of trying to control my choices? Zhuangzi's eyes flared with sudden emotion. Because gardeners can lose their crops to disease, to weather, to the simple passage of time. I will not lose you, Elena. I cannot. The conversation was interrupted by Captain Santos's voice over the intercom. Dr. Vasquez, we have a situation. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple ships approaching our position. Federation vessels, but they're moving in attack formation. Elena felt Zhuangzi's presence shift immediately, the ancient being's consciousness expanding outward to encompass the sensor readings from across the station. The temperature in the lab dropped as Zhuangzi's protective instincts flared to life. 17 ships, Zhuangzi said, her voice taking on harmonics that made the lab's equipment hum in resonance. Moderate armament by current standards, though pathetically primitive by any reasonable measure. They approach with hostile intent. Elena stood quickly, her mind racing. They're probably just being cautious. This is first contact with a being from their mythology. They don't know your intentions. My intentions are irrelevant. They approach Elena with weapons charged and shields raised. This is an act of aggression that I will not tolerate. Elena felt the familiar chill of impending disaster. She had seen this pattern before. Zhuangzi's fierce protectiveness overwhelming her tentative attempts at restraint whenever she perceived a threat to Elena's safety. Zhuangzi, please, Elena said, moving to place herself between the ancient being and the lab's sensor displays. Let me talk to them first. Let me try to resolve this diplomatically. Diplomacy is for equals, beloved. These creatures are insects buzzing around something they cannot comprehend. They will be dealt with accordingly. Elena felt power building in the air around Zhuangzi, reality itself beginning to warp in response to the last singer's rising anger. Throughout the station, crew members would be experiencing the same electromagnetic disturbances that preceded Zhuangzi's more dramatic displays of power. If you destroy those ships, you'll prove to the entire galaxy that you're exactly the kind of threat they believe you to be, Elena said desperately. You'll make it impossible for any species to trust you, which means you'll make it impossible for me to maintain relationships with my own kind. Zhuangzi paused, but Elena could still feel the cosmic forces gathering around the ancient being like a barely contained storm. Then, what would you have me do when faced with those who would threaten you? Let me prove that I can handle this myself. Let me show you that trusting my judgment doesn't mean losing me. Elena moved to the lab's communication console, opening a channel to the approaching Federation fleet. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez aboard the research station Prometheus. I am the human liaison to the entity you've come to investigate. I request immediate communication with your fleet commander. The response came within moments. Dr. Vasquez, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Federation Defense Force. We have orders to secure the entity and evacuate all human personnel from your station. Please prepare for immediate transfer to our flagship. Elena felt Zhuangzi's presence flare with rage at the word secure, and she quickly activated a privacy screen around the communication console to prevent the ancient being from hearing the fleet's transmissions directly. Admiral, with respect, the entity in question is not a prisoner or a specimen. She is a sentient being with capabilities that far exceed anything in the Federation's experience. Any attempt to secure her will result in the destruction of your entire fleet. Dr. Vasquez, our intelligence suggests that you may be under some form of mental influence. We cannot trust your judgment in this matter. Elena closed her eyes, realizing that the situation was spiraling beyond her ability to control. The Federation fleet saw Zhuangzi as a threat to be contained. Zhuangzi saw the fleet as an obstacle to be eliminated. And Elena was caught in the middle, trying to prevent a confrontation that could spark a galactic war. Behind her, she could hear the crystalline singing that meant Zhuangzi was preparing to use her power. The ancient being was no longer interested in diplomatic solutions. She was ready to remove the threat to Elena in the most direct way possible. Elena opened the communication channel one more time. Admiral Kethvar, you have 30 seconds to withdraw your fleet to a safe distance before you experience firsthand why the Ethereal Collective was once the most feared civilization in the galaxy. And Admiral, I'm not under any mental influence. I'm trying to save your lives. She cut the connection and turned to face Zhuangzi, who was now hovering several inches off the lab floor, her crystalline skin blazing with enough light to cast shadows on the walls. Elena, Zhuangzi said, her voice carrying frequencies that made space itself vibrate, step aside. I will remove this threat quickly and cleanly. No, Elena said firmly. If you want to prove that you can love me without destroying everything I care about, then you'll find another way to handle this situation. And if I allow them to approach, if I permit them to threaten you in the name of your precious diplomacy, and they succeed in taking you from me. Elena met those galactic eyes without flinching. Then, you'll have to trust that I'm strong enough and smart enough to find my way back to you. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the approaching Federation fleet. Elena stood perfectly still, knowing that her next words might determine whether humanity's first encounter with cosmic-level power ended in peace or in the complete annihilation of 17 ships and everyone aboard them. Choose, Zhuangzi, she said softly. Love or control. You can't have both. The Federation flagship Harmony's Edge was a masterpiece of cooperative engineering, representing the combined technological achievements of 47 species working in unprecedented unity. Admiral Kethvar, a tall figure whose crystalline exoskeleton marked him as a member of the ancient Veltar species, stood in the center of his command bridge watching the human research station grow larger on his view screen. His secondary hearts beat in rapid synchronization as he contemplated the magnitude of what they were attempting. Admiral, reported his sensor operator, we're detecting massive energy fluctuations from the station. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever's aboard that facility is operating on principles we don't understand. Kethvar nodded grimly. The briefing files he had received from Federation Command were filled with references to ancient myths and half-remembered legends, stories passed down through countless generations about beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts. Most civilizations had such stories. The difference was that the Veltar racial memory went back far enough to remember when those stories were current events. Sir, his communications officer called out. We're receiving a transmission from the station. It's Dr. Vasquez. Kethvar listened to Elena's warning with growing unease. The human's voice carried absolute conviction, and the casual way she spoke of galactic destruction suggested she had seen firsthand what the entity aboard her station was capable of. Admiral, his tactical officer reported. Energy levels around the research station are spiking beyond our sensor capabilities. If that's a weapon charging, it's operating on a scale we've never encountered. Kethvar made a decision that would have seemed impossible an hour ago. All ships, withdraw to maximum sensor range. Maintain defensive positions, but do not, under any circumstances, power weapons or raise shields. We're dealing with something that could erase us from existence before we even knew we were under attack. As the fleet pulled back, Kethvar opened a direct communication channel to the Prometheus. Dr. Vasquez, this is Admiral Kethvar. My fleet is withdrawing as requested. But I need you to understand that the entire Federation is watching this situation. If that entity poses a threat to galactic security. Elena's image appeared on his view screen, and Kethvar was struck by how young she looked, how impossibly calm despite the cosmic forces swirling around her. Admiral, I understand your concerns. But you need to understand something about HFY that your intelligence reports probably didn't mention. She's not evil. She's not conquering or destroying for the sake of power or expansion. She's the last survivor of a species that died out through natural causes. And she's been alone for 700,000 years. Her actions aren't driven by malice. They're driven by terror of being alone again. Dr. Vasquez, Kethvar said carefully, the psychological state of the entity doesn't change the fact that it has demonstrated capabilities that could threaten entire civilizations. Which is exactly why the Federation's approach to this situation matters so much, Elena replied. If you treat her like a threat, she'll become one. If you treat her like a person, there's a chance for something better. Behind Elena, Kethvar could see the edge of the station's modified lab, and occasionally glimpses of crystalline light that moved in patterns too complex for his eyes to follow. Whatever was back, there was listening to every word of their conversation. What exactly are you proposing, Dr. Vasquez? A meeting. Face-to-face, in neutral space. HFY has agreed to attend if certain conditions are met. Kethvar felt his secondary heart skip. She's agreed to negotiate? She's agreed to listen. There's a difference, but it's a start. 2 days later, the hastily arranged diplomatic meeting took place in orbit around the binary star system of Kepler-16, far from any inhabited worlds or space lanes. The Federation had assembled its most experienced diplomats, xenopsychologists, and cultural specialists aboard a specially modified diplomatic vessel. Elena had insisted on being present as HFY's translator and cultural interpreter, despite the obvious risks to her safety. The meeting room aboard the diplomatic ship had been designed to accommodate the physiological needs of dozens of different species, but nothing had prepared its creators for HFY's presence. She materialized in the center of the room, not teleported, not beamed in, but literally assembled herself from ambient energy, and her mere existence seemed to make reality more vivid, more intense, as if her presence enhanced the fundamental forces that held matter together. Elena stood beside the ancient being, looking impossibly small and fragile next to a consciousness that spanned galaxies, yet somehow managing to project an authority that commanded respect from every diplomat in the room. Honored delegates, Elena began. I would like to introduce HFY of the Ethereal Collective, also known as the Last Singer, Keeper of the Eternal Memory, and Guardian of Ancient Knowledge. She has agreed to this meeting in the hope that our species might find common ground for coexistence. Ambassador Telana of the Zephyrian Council, a graceful being whose translucent skin revealed complex patterns of bioluminescent organs, leaned forward. HFY, we are honored by your presence. The Federation has many questions about your intentions in our region of space. When HFY spoke, her voice filled the room without benefit of speakers or translation devices, each delegate hearing her words in their own language, while simultaneously understanding the original harmonic complexities of her communication. I have no intentions regarding your region of space, Ambassador Telana. Your concerns are those of children squabbling over toys in a small corner of an infinite playground. I am here only because Elena Vasquez has convinced me that understanding your perspective might serve some useful purpose. The casual dismissal in those words sent waves of tension through the assembled delegates. But Elena quickly stepped forward. What HFY means, she said diplomatically, is that her interests are currently focused on personal rather than political matters. She's not seeking to establish territory or influence within Federation space. Admiral Kethvar, representing the Federation Defense Force, addressed his next question directly to Elena. Dr. Vasquez, our sensors detected massive energy expenditures during the recent incident with our fleet. Can you help us understand the nature and scope of the entity's capabilities? Elena glanced at HFY, who nodded slightly. HFY's people were capable of manipulating matter and energy on scales that encompass entire solar systems. They could create or destroy stars, reshape planets, and alter the fundamental laws of physics within limited areas of space. What you detected during the fleet incident was essentially her way of testing your ship's structural integrity. She was deciding whether to simply disable you or completely erase you from existence. The room fell completely silent as the delegates processed the implications of Elena's matter-of-fact explanation. Chancellor Vector of the Regillian Assembly, a massive being whose rocky exterior concealed one of the Federation's finest diplomatic minds, spoke with careful precision. Zwaxthara, given your capabilities, the Federation must ask, what assurance can you give us that you will not use your power to interfere with the affairs of our member species? Zwaxthara's crystalline skin shifted through patterns of deep purple and gold as she considered the question. I can give you no such assurance, Chancellor Vector. My actions will be dictated by my needs and desires, not by your political agreements or territorial boundaries. Before the delegates could react to what sounded like a threat, Elena quickly added, however, Zwaxthara's primary need at this time is companionship and understanding. Her desire is to learn about the diverse forms of life that have evolved since her species' transcendence. These goals are completely compatible with peaceful coexistence. And if circumstances change, pressed Admiral Kefar, if this entity's needs or desires shift in ways that conflict with Federation interests? Zwaxthara herself answered this time, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's hull resonate like a vast musical instrument. Then, I will do whatever is necessary to protect what I value most. But, understand this, Admiral, I have lived for millions of years and guided the evolution of countless species. I do not act capriciously or without careful consideration of consequences. Elena felt Zwaxthara's mental presence at the edge of her consciousness, and she sensed that the ancient being was becoming impatient with the diplomatic process. Time to move toward concrete proposals. The Federation has expressed interest in learning from Zwaxthara's vast knowledge and experience, Elena said. She's indicated willingness to share information about ancient civilizations, advanced technologies, and cosmic phenomena that could benefit all member species. In exchange, she would like the opportunity to study current galactic civilizations, to learn how life has developed and adapted since her people's time. Ambassador Telana exchanged glances with her colleagues. This sounds like the foundation for a mutually beneficial arrangement. What specific terms would you propose? Elena had spent weeks preparing for this moment, working with Zwaxthara to develop a framework that might satisfy both the ancient being's needs and the Federation's security concerns. Zwaxthara would accept a formal position as scientific advisor to the Federation Council, with the understanding that her participation would be voluntary and limited to matters where her expertise might prove valuable. In return, the Federation would grant her observer status, allowing her to study member species and their cultures without interference. And what about the Human Research Station? Asked Admiral Kefar. What role would Dr. Vasquez play in this arrangement? Before Elena could respond, Zwaxthara stepped forward, her presence suddenly commanding the absolute attention of every being in the room. Elena Vasquez remains under my protection, she said, her voice carrying undertones that made several delegates instinctively step backward. She is my companion, my guide to understanding younger civilizations, and my anchor to this reality. Any agreement between myself and the Federation must acknowledge that her well-being and happiness are my highest priorities. Elena felt her cheeks flush at the possessive tone in Zwaxthara's declaration, but she also detected something new in the ancient being's words, a subtle acknowledgement that Elena's happiness might require freedoms that pure possession couldn't provide. What Zwaxthara is saying, Elena clarified, is that any long-term arrangement must include provisions for our continued collaboration. I've agreed to serve as her cultural interpreter and scientific partner for the foreseeable future. The negotiations continued for 6 hours, covering everything from communication protocols to territorial boundaries to procedures for handling disputes. Throughout it all, Elena found herself walking a careful line between translating Zwaxthara's cosmic perspective into terms the Federation delegates could understand, and helping the ancient being grasp the complex social and political realities of modern galactic civilization. Finally, as the discussions began to wind down, Chancellor Vector addressed what everyone recognized as the central question. Zwaxthara, the Federation appreciates your willingness to engage in this dialogue. But, we must ask directly, can you accept the limitations that come with peaceful coexistence? Can you commit to resolving disputes through communication rather than the exercise of power? Zwaxthara was quiet for a long moment, her galactic eyes fixed on Elena's face as she considered her response. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of cosmic authority tempered by something that might have been hope. I will attempt to honor the spirit of peaceful coexistence, Chancellor. But, you must understand that my tolerance for threats to Elena's well-being is absolute zero. If any being or organization threatens her safety or attempts to separate her from me through force or deception, I will respond with whatever level of power is necessary to eliminate that threat. Elena stepped forward, placing her hand on Zwaxthara's crystalline arm in a gesture that sent ripples of light through the ancient being's skin. And, I've agreed to help Zwaxthara understand the difference between genuine threats and simple disagreements, Elena said. This isn't just about establishing diplomatic relations. It's about teaching someone who's been alone for 700,000 years how to form healthy relationships with others. Admiral Kefar looked around the room at his fellow delegates, reading the mixture of hope and apprehension in their expressions. Then, let us proceed with a preliminary agreement, he said. A trial period during which we can all learn whether coexistence is truly possible. As the formal documents were prepared, Elena stood beside Zwaxthara, watching the stars wheel past the diplomatic ship's viewports. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain and full of potential conflicts, but also bright with possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. Are you satisfied with this arrangement? Zwaxthara asked, her voice now pitched for Elena's ears alone. Elena considered the question carefully. The agreement they had reached was far from perfect. It required constant vigilance to prevent misunderstandings that could escalate into cosmic disasters. It placed Elena in a position of enormous responsibility as the bridge between two fundamentally different forms of consciousness. But it also offered something unprecedented, the chance for humanity to learn from a being who had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies, and the opportunity to help heal a cosmic entity whose greatest wound was the simple absence of connection with others. I think it's a beginning, Elena said. And sometimes beginnings are more important than perfect endings. HFY's crystalline skin pulsed with patterns that Elena had learned to recognize as contentment. Then, let us see what wonders we might discover together, Elena Vasquez. Let us see if this universe still holds surprises for one as ancient as myself. As the diplomatic ship prepared to return to Federation space, carrying news of humanity's newest and most powerful ally, Elena reflected on how completely her life had changed since that first moment of contact. She had set out to study an unknown alien species, and instead had become the companion and teacher of a being whose obsession with her might either save the galaxy or reshape it beyond recognition. But that, she thought with a mixture of excitement and trepidation, was a problem for tomorrow. Today, she had helped forge the most important diplomatic relationship in galactic history, and she had done it by teaching a cosmic entity the most fundamentally human truth of all, that love without freedom is just another form of imprisonment, and that true connection can only exist between beings who choose to be together rather than those who have no choice but to remain apart. The stars sang around them as they headed toward an uncertain but infinitely promising future, and for the first time in 700,000 years, HFY was no longer alone.